Welcome to the All Out Leadership Podcast, hosted by Pastor Eric Lawson, where each episode is uniquely designed to help you live all out by bringing you practical leadership from a biblical perspective delivered in 10 minutes or less. So whether you're a business leader, serving in ministry, or simply looking to grow in your leadership, this podcast is for you. Before we dive into this week's topic, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and download the show notes at ericlawson.com/podcast. And while you're at it, feel free to share the content on social media. Now, let's join Pastor Eric for this week's conversation.
Welcome to another edition of the All Out Leadership Podcast. Today, we are going to be taking an excerpt from my new book, Overcoming Overwhelmed. And I want to talk about one of the hidden benefits of being overwhelmed. And it really comes down to the title, The Gift of Too Much. The gift of too much. There are times that God allows us the gift of too much because we learn some very valuable lessons. There's three important lessons we learn from the gift of too much, but I want to focus on just a little snippet from the life of Moses that we learn why the gift of too much. So we come to the story of Moses. He's delivered 2 to 3 million Israelites out of Egypt, out of slavery. They're crossed the Red Sea. God's done some amazing miracles, but any leader knows you can't make everybody happy. Somebody's complaining about something. Somebody was posting on social media about Pastor Moses and what they didn't like, and he's just being stressed out. He's having to deal with all the conflicts. He's having to solve all the problems. He's the mediator. He's the leader. He's just carrying a bunch of hats, and he's worn out. And so Numbers chapter 11, verse 14, I love this statement here. He goes, God, I'm not able to bear all these people alone because the burden is too heavy for me. Now, here is something that's interesting. Moses actually got this right. When he was praying, when he was complaining and talking to God, he actually was correct on the assessment. The first thing was this: I can't do it alone. He said, God, I can't do this all by myself. God created you and I to not be able to succeed alone. Moses is getting an important lesson here. There are some times that God allows overwhelmed in our life to teach us through the gift of too much that we aren't going to succeed as lone rangers. We need church. We need church family. We need our small group. We need the body of Christ. We need other gifts, talents, and personalities around us to fulfill the mission that God has for us. You aren't going to build your successful company independent as the Lone Ranger. You need others. The second thing that he got right was this burden is too heavy for me. And so bingo, ding, 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 Moses, you're right. You got that part again. So he got the first two parts right, but his assessment was wrong. And this is often where we miss it. Like when we're talking to God, we're processing our pain, we're processing our problems, we're processing the gift of too much. We actually may be right in what we're saying, but like Moses, we often get our conclusion wrong. So Numbers 11:15, he says, if this is how you're going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me now. If I have found favor in your eyes, do not let me face my own ruin. So Moses was right. I can't do this alone. Moses was right. God, this is too heavy for me. But here's what was wrong. He blamed God, and he said, God, you're not being right. You aren't treating me fair, and woe's me, and just go ahead and take me out. And this is going to become my ruin if you don't intervene. Often the thing that we think is overwhelming us, we go, God, this is going to destroy me. Actually, what he allowed it to build him up, not destroy him. So he learns a valuable lesson in what God says to him. And here's our takeaway. If you're feeling overwhelmed because the burden's too great, maybe you're leading something that's bigger than you in your own capacity, let's learn from Moses. So the Lord said to Moses, gather to me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you may know to be the elders of the people and officers over them. Bring them to the tabernacle of meeting, that they may stand there with you. Then I will come down and talk with you there. I'll take of the spirit that is upon you, and I'll put that same spirit on them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with you, that you may not bear it yourself alone. What Moses was taught was the gift of too much taught him first to hand something off. You know the motto of a perfectionist: if it's to be, it's up to me. If you want a job done right, do it yourself. Those are the statements and mottos of people headed to burnout. Like they have really cool little padded rooms where you get cool little jackets. If you live by that motto, Mom, if you live by that motto, boss, you're gonna burn out and you're gonna lose it. If you think if it's to be, it's up to me, and you think you have to do this all alone. So the gift of too much begins to teach us hand some things off. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details of how we do that. We get into some practicalities of the book of handing things off, but what we really see is living a life of duplication. We see leaders are to take the DNA, the spirit that's upon them, and pass it on others. Success is not what you do, but success is what you can empower others to do. And at the end of our life, our success isn't measured really by how much we achieved, but how much we empowered others to achieve and what we could achieve together, because together we're always going to achieve more. So hopefully that just gives you a little taste of the gift of too much. 2 other practical points that Moses learns from God regarding that. So if you haven't yet picked up the book, Overcoming Overwhelmed, I encourage you to go to Amazon.com and you can order the book there, Overcoming Overwhelmed, and I'm sure it will be an encouragement to you. All right, I look forward to seeing you next week. We're going to jump back into the life of David and learn some very practical leadership principles back in the life of King David. See you next week.
Thank you for joining us on the All Out Leadership Podcast. We hope you gained new biblical insight that challenged you to grow in your leadership. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we would love your help in getting the content out farther. You can help by subscribing to the podcast at eriklawson.com/podcast and telling others about it. Next week, Pastor Eric will be back with another episode. So until then, we hope you have a great week being an all-out leader.